Welcome everybody to the pre-pod.
Hey, back. We
Right
back.
on, right on.
We back.
Uh,
We back.
like we never left, bro. We shouldn't have left the people for as long as we did, but a lot to talk about, man.
Right.
It's a very news-heavy couple days.
Yeah.
Um,
Tumultuous times in the U.S. right now.
right, man. I mean, and so we just have to process it like we do as humans, and give our thoughts on the matter. But I guess first and foremost, condolences to George Floyd's
Definitely.
family.
Rest in
Uh,
power.
it's a very the my thoughts are very raw right now because I literally just watched the video. Um, it's about 2 days old now, maybe 3 days old,
Hmm.
where the incident happened, and there's a lot of elements to it, that obviously are very difficult to get through and digest. Namely, the brutality of the death, uh, and then something that caught my ear was, you know, how how vociferous the crowd, the people around were. Like they were, you could hear the when the panic hit in everyone's voices, like,
Right.
and it's hard not to look at it as a color coded scene. But there's a white officer that instinctively it draws a little bit of like a stereotype already, and then there's a black man in a tank top, and he's very strong, and he's being arrested, and most people are already triggered by that scene. It doesn't matter how comfortable you may be with race. It's to be alive in this country, and to not see to see that and not have a reaction. It's I think we'd be lying. And then there's an interesting element of a second officer. I think he's a Vietnamese officer, and so immediately you see like a structure of it, of like, okay, am I looking at this as in a race situation? And then I notice, initially it's another African American brother who's like shouting a lot at the officer. You hear him saying he was at the academy, so he knows that move is not standard like a protocol. And he's pleading, and he's getting angrier. And at that moment, the crowd around is not like hysterical yet. But then you start seeing like white people getting involved. There's a white lady who runs across the street to uh, tell the officers check his pulse. Like I guess she had EMT training, or maybe she was an EMT somewhere. And all these elements start coming together, and then uh, as soon as we realize that George is no longer like responding, uh, I think it just becomes a huge tragedy, and I feel shameful for watching it. I think nobody should have to be publicly, I guess, executed. I would say publicly executed in such a way. Something very primal and olden days about it. I instantly think of an Emmett Till. I think of lynchings during when slavery was the normal in this country, and so that's where all these triggers are tied to for me, man. I definitely I have an emotional reaction right now because it's just fresh off the top of my head, but
Right.
at the same time, I've received all the information beforehand, and I really tried to separate myself from those colors. Imagine if it was just all gray and there was no black, white, or Asian person, and it was just people in uniform and people not. And that scene, it's still very very troubling. But yeah, man,
Yeah. I
those are my
mean,
first reactions.
obviously, it's a very difficult video to watch because you're seeing somebody die pretty much right in front of your eyes.
Yeah,
Um, so initially it was just shock in my eyes of just, I can't believe this is happening. You see this man, George screaming, I can't breathe, to where basically you see the life kind of leaving his body as far as him just going limp and no movements. And, initially my thoughts were just like, this is, horrific. Like, why is this officer's knee on his throat?
right.
That's not where you put a knee. Anybody that's had training, you put it at the middle of the back, you put it like, somewhere. The fact that, he doesn't realize that shoving your knee into somebody's throat can lead to somebody not being able to breathe. The fact everybody screaming at this officer is not doing anything. I'm just like, oh, this was mind boggling. So obviously sadness and anger. And then, coupled with what was going on, in the past month, I guess, with videos coming out, whether it be Ahmed
Ahmad.
Aubrey,
Yeah.
whether it be, the Coopers in the park with the dog.
Right.
Um,
That was a
it
day
just,
before. I think that news story
right.
was really popular. Yeah.
I think they were both on the same day actually.
Wow.
And so then it's like, okay, we're in a political cycle. Why are all these videos coming out back to back to back? Oh, and in the middle of that, you saw at the nursing home the African American nurse that's beating up the white the white elderly person. So
Right.
a lot of these very, like you use the word, triggering, race related videos are coming out back to back every single week. It seems like there's another race related video that came out. So now I'm like, obviously these things are happening, but the fact that the way that they're being covered, and the fact that, if you're looking at the Twitter sphere, the last 4 weeks has just been race related conversation. You see, people coming out with their different views about it and whatnot. So I'm like, after the initial thoughts of how sad and angry I was, it was a little bit of fear, because I was thinking, this is going to be a boiling point at a certain point, that we're going to see some really craziness that happens. And then the next day, obviously, you started seeing, all of the riots. You saw the images of Target being on fire, AutoZone being on fire, people looting, and all of this kind of stuff. So definitely, definitely a trying time. Definitely a time where emotions are high, especially with this coming off of Corona. People are, not in the best state of mind. Maybe people are financially not where they want to be, and there's just been all this. We've been, for the last, few months. It's just
Pressure.
been
A lot of
fear,
pressure.
pressure, and then just fear, 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 fear. That's coming from all different angles. Um, it's kind of like a powder keg, and yeah, video after video after this, eventually it was going to explode. And it seems like we're at that point right now. So a
Hmm.
lot of just fear, sadness, and just prayer, hoping that us as a society can take a step back and try to think without emotions being so high.
Yeah.
Obviously, at this
Super
moment,
key
it's
right
not
there.
possible. So um, so those are kind of just what was going through my head through all these situations, for sure.
Man, I hear you on so many fronts. Uh, I feel like you touched on the the pattern of videos, and the frequency being, so consistent. So you got to wonder what is the motivation, if there is any motivation behind how much coverage certain things are getting. Um, but then at the same time, I will say that, as sharing videos online, especially through Facebook or to YouTube, through Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, things that catch on virally, I think there's some organic nature to it. Like there's, again, like this video is really hard. It's this type of video is not explicitly captured. Uh, Speaking in regards to George Floyd, this was a very the moment was very clear cut when things went wrong. There was
Right,
with Ahmad Arbery, there's moments where the camera cuts away and it's, a lot of the arguments was, he's charged Ahmad's like charging a man with a gun. Uh, there's, context, so much context removed there
right.
that it's harder to make that judgment call.
And it
Um,
wasn't the typical officer versus, you
these are
know,
more
uh,
renegade, people who took their hands into the law.
right,
And but yeah, and so with regards to, this was almost a tipping point, right? Those other videos didn't cause instant riots, if you want to use right. And I'll be honest with you, I thought about the riot for, or the act of rioting. What does it mean? Why does it happen? What are the conditions? Uh, and I have to, you have to understand. We talk about herd immunity. There's such a thing as herd mentality.
sure,
All it takes is me to see somebody doing something to normalize it, thinking, oh, he just did something with no repercussion. Guess what? When the crowd is that big. So I never disclude that aspect of it. And then also the true nature of somebody who's, becoming an anarchist who believes that the government's laws no longer apply to me. I'm just going to go out and destroy things with no regard. Uh, the looting and the rioting is, more of a symptom. It's not the main issue. The main issue
Sure.
is a step before of what is causing, because we don't have an everyday situation where people gather and just start, going into businesses and destroying things.
Right.
Uh, so I really thought, okay, it's not so much the act of rooting and rioting, because when people win teams win championships, inevitably, when you get large crowds and they're fired up, maybe emotionally charged because their team won or their team lost, even, you see similar type of behavior, whether it's,
Right.
setting things on fire or, you know, unfortunately, if you do it in a poor area or where there are people who are like you and I, if we're walking down the street right now, we have enough security to know that, hey, if there are people stealing TVs, that you and I are not going to join in that. Our circumstances, thank God, have provided for, some reasoning in that situation. A lot of the looting is being done by,
Or maybe
socio social,
not having that desperation.
right. And these people have, they in that moment they feel they have nothing to lose, so they're going to go do it. So there's also an economic status involved with that act. Maybe there are some people who just love trouble, and that's a very small percentage, I think.
I mean,
um,
I think there's different levels to it. There's obviously going to be people that are, well, first of all, I think as far as what we're seeing right now in Minneapolis is, you and I both, and maybe I should just speak for myself. Obviously, I'm not black. So there's already this um relationship with the police that maybe I don't understand
yeah,
or don't feel on the same level as somebody who's African American or black in this country, that um, whether it's happened to them or not, or just it's a common conversation that you treat police differently if you're black versus or you're treated differently if you're black than if you're any other race. But so um, I can't put myself in the shoes of maybe the type of anger or type of desperation or that an individual feels when they see something like that. It's obviously triggering them in a different way that it would trigger. It's triggering most everybody on a human level, but obviously if you're black, it's triggering you on a different level because of circumstances or relationships
directly
with the
connected to the
police.
visual. Yeah, yeah, and absolutely.
Sure.
The incident itself,
So
the police. You're absolutely right.
when we talk about the riots and looting, you know, uh, I'm looking at it, and obviously on one end you understand the anger, and it's just when you're feeling so angry, obviously writing a letter to your senator doesn't necessarily take away that anger the way you know maybe like throwing a brick at a cop car or whatever, the anger of just like wanting to release it in some way. Making a call to your senator doesn't necessarily have that same maybe emotional release. But the biggest thing that I took away, or when I was looking at this, is after the riots that I think about the most when it comes to race relations were the riots in LA after the Rodney King beating, and you know the destruction that caused, and seeing how that neighborhood, that of all, I remember seeing the visual of all the store owners on top of their roof with their trying to protect their things, and just business owners, whatever color, black, white, Asian, just talking about how, like, just being like, my whole life, I'm seeing my whole life being ruined right in front of my eyes. It's just like there's the emotional level of there's people hurting, there's people angry, but there's also the other side of you're hurting innocent people as well that have nothing to do with the situation. The businesses that were around, the target employee doesn't have anything to do with that officer that killed George, or the small business that you're going into and throwing a brick through their window has nothing to do with the injustices happening on the street. So you feel for, you understand the anger, but then you also are just like, it's not the right way of doing things in my eyes. And it's interesting to see that debate where some people are saying, like, we have no other avenue of showing how frustrated we are, so they feel like this is justified as far as their actions. But on the flip side, it's like, well, there's a lot of people that are being affected by this that had nothing to do with that situation. Um, so for me, I kind of feel like there's other ways to go about it. But then again, I can't sit here and act like I am triggered the same exact way as maybe some of those people that started those riots were triggered. But I have to say, there's obviously going to be people that are truly hurt by the situation that are going out there and releasing anger. But there's other people that are just taking an opportunity to get free stuff from a Target, or just out and about, like you said, the herd mentality, just doing whatever they see other people doing without maybe any necessarily thought as to why I'm doing this. It's just a reaction to what's going on, in that situation, in that moment.
Yeah, man. So with regards to, uh, I guess people who are really like, because I think what is the word protest, right? The protest, when you mention writing a letter to your senator, that's not the level of a protest just yet. You're just you're offering a complaint, But then when you gather together with a group of people, or even by yourself, and you're I guess when you're physically in the face of or you're creating a public statement, right? You're opening yourself to the public. Like for example, Kaepernick taking a knee, that's a public protest, right?
Right.
Uh, then then there's escalations. Then the protest becomes okay. With Colin Kaepernick, he chose to do it in his profession. Then the people who show up on the streets in front of a police station or a courthouse or a congressperson's office, if they're marching on the streets, they're physically protesting by perhaps disrupting traffic. One could argue that I've been a part of a protest where we were blocking traffic. That's considered a breaking of the rule of the law, right?
Hmm.
Police were present, but they're willing to compromise. So I think respecting other people's property, uh, for anyone who's out there, because I can guarantee you, while that looting is happening, by from what the video shows, maybe uh, I've seen like maybe hundreds of people actually in and out of the stores, just on what's on camera. If we're gonna go with this, whatever's on camera is what we're restricted to judging, because you and I are not on the ground to know.
Right.
So my initial feeling is there are genuine people out there who are not concerned with the looting that are still protesting in the places where the police have not completely forced them away.
Sure.
And then I do agree that there are weak-minded people who show up for the protest and then suddenly are diverted. But by all means, the video footage also shows I'm seeing people of other races, whiter people, darker people. It's a mix. Yeah, we're seeing a certain visuals of the TVs and whatnot, and those kind of linger the longest. And then there's a woman on a wheelchair who, we don't want to get into the nitty gritty of these smaller incidents because, at the
I
end
mean,
of
we
the
don't know. Obviously, the media is going to spin it one way. We
right,
really don't know
yeah,
what the truth is and
I'm not.
why
Yeah,
circumstances are happening.
sure. So I mean, with all of these, I want to call them smaller fires at this point. We've already had the literal biggest fire in the the match was you know George Floyd's death, which again we should pull this conversation back to the reason of why it caused a protest in the first place, as opposed to the protest turned into looting and rioting. I mean, again, I think there are people who are genuinely there to protest and are still protesting, and it's, I think whenever the rooting or the looting and the rioting starts happening, it becomes the visual that catches the
Right.
news the most. And
It gives
unfortunately,
opposition a way of changing the narrative, right?
right, and the
So
conversation no longer becomes about why did the police officer do what he did. without anyone else being able to intervene? And why did would the
Right.
officer have the heart, which is what I would like to get into, is how does an officer have the heart or lack thereof to, when everyone is screaming at you, telling you, hey, you're killing this man, to continue doing it, and then you have
He
to
didn't even
question
look down. It seemed like, I don't know.
it.
I don't.
And yeah, his facial expression was that of like he was smoking a cigarette, just like handling his business. And the officer who was holding the crowd back, his actions were almost symbolically as deplorable. Obviously the physical act was not him, but the it was such a, like, oh, I mean, yeah. I mean, so I would like to pivot the conversation back to the root of the issue, which, and why would these things happen this way? What is going on in, you know if you want to get really precise with it, each police academy's entrance process, how much of each police academy is allowing racism to occur? You can draw lines of slave when slaves would run away, these overseers, they would wear similar badges, and they would you know go after and try to collect runaway slaves. And these principles, were it's almost I'm almost certain that there's a connection between a slave owner and a racist cop. You know, there's or a slave overseer, I should say. Positions of
Well, I mean,
authority inflicting on, and again, we don't know what the percentage is ever going to be, because unfortunately there's no racism test. But understanding what
the first thing is, before we jump and bring up racism, because obviously the image is a white cop on a black, a black, a black, a white cop on a black victim. I would say in this case, even though he was being arrested for whatever he was being arrested for. So obviously the immediate thought is this is a racist cop. Well, none of us know if that's racism or that's just a evil guy that loves taking power over somebody that he has power with, kind of
really
thing.
quickly, when you say none of us know that's racism, when an action occurred, like there were other incidents caught on film, but none of those incidents uh, triggered the clear cut racial reaction that we're seeing. So I
But
think
I'm
to
saying
say,
the actual officer, to say that that officer was a racist, that's what I'm saying. Like, we're assuming that this guy just did it because he was. When you say he's a racist cop, that means
I'm
he
not
was
sure if
doing
I'm
that
calling
just
him
because.
a racist cop. I'm thinking that there is a connecting line between those slave overseers and the bloodlines that passed on racism into police forces throughout the country. Just as there could be a racist person in another field, I'm saying there's a likelihood, and potentially a higher likelihood, that you'll find in specific cities, perhaps, more racist cops uh, than in other places. And there's just a higher chance that you're going to find it if there's a pattern involved. And also just
So this
the
is
nature of the business of the occupation is one of authority, one of power. And so my initial reaction to him, the story that he used his knee to kill him, was more of a ego and power. I don't want this man,
sure.
because he's a strong man. I've only seen the pictures up until this hour ago. So my initial thought was, okay, he doesn't want to be shown up by this, physically imposing. And apparently, there was questions of if he was on a substance. I heard in the video, "Oh, what are you on?" or something like that. So initially, yeah, I thought, okay, it's possible that he just wanted to exert excessive force. It's this issue of excessive force. He's got anger management issues, maybe, or inferiority complex. Um,
Or not trained well, which it could be a
I
huge
mean, he's a
possibility as
long
far as.
time officer. I think he's been on the force for a while,
But
and
that doesn't mean that
I
necessarily,
mean
like,
that's it.
you
That's an
know,
underlying
you
issue. Yeah, I
because you
think he
can't say, regardless of experience, if you've never been in that exact situation, putting, like, being in that fearful position. We look at cops like these
he didn't look
situations are
fearful.
happening.
The video suggested he was very comfortable and confident.
Well, I mean, like I said, we're doing a lot of assumptions when we go to those levels. we're assuming based
He
off of
was
what
kind
we're
of just
seeing.
like chilling. That was the posture in his face too. Uh,
But that's what I'm saying. Like most people, if you would look at that and you had any kind of like as far as training, whether it be like jujitsu training or any kind of like combat training, you know not to put the knee on the back of the neck. You know that you put
okay,
the knee. So like I said, whether that's bad training or whether that's an intentional thing that this guy was doing, because of whatever the situation is, who knows? But what I want to get it back to is one, this cop obviously needed to be fired. I think he needs to be prosecuted. It's a bad cop. That was a bad situation. It was handled the wrong way and ended up leading to somebody's death. And I feel like the brunt of the law he shouldn't get any preferred treatment just because he's a cop. Which when we move over like what really needs to change, that's going to be one thing that I bring up. But the one thing that I don't want to happen because I have a lot of cop friends and I have a lot of friends that I know, when I talk to them about all of these racial issues and all these kind of stuff, you know, most of the cops that, and I would say like 90% of the cops that are out there are good cops that are handling
I don't think
situations
you
the
can make
right
that
way.
claim. I don't think you can make that claim.
Well, I'm saying that, but
We don't have enough
the
data on cops committing bad actions because it's such a fraternity. Continue.
Well, what I'm saying is the only you don't see so in that day yesterday, there's going to be hundreds, if not thousands, of instances that cops pulled over somebody, that cops dealt with arresting somebody, that all this kind of stuff. The only videos that make it to national news aren't when a cop does it the right way. It's the cops that are doing it the bad way. And if you only see when you only see cops being videos of cops handling things the wrong way, it's easy to paint that all cops are this way or there's a rampant problem with cops and all these kinds
Yeah,
of
I
things.
don't think so. I
So
don't think
that
that's the case. Yeah.
well, yeah, but I think that like obviously there's an issue of any with anybody getting power over somebody, an unchecked power. That's going to be
Ding
a
ding.
wrong
Yeah, that's
situation
that's the
because if
that's
you
the
give
word.
unchecked power to any human
They will
that
abuse it.
has an issue that or has underlying pathological issues, maybe it's racism, maybe it's insecurities, maybe it's Napoleon complex, whatever the case may be, that causes that person to not handle unchecked power the right way. These situations are gonna be end up that way. It's just like you could give a gun to the wrong person. One person will never kill anybody with that gun. Another person might be a mass shooter with that gun. It's not it's unchecked power is what the underlying issue is, and we need a way of being able to check that power, um, and that's one of the big things. Like I put it up on my Twitter. Like you could sit here and call that guy a bad cop, say that this is a horrible situation that should have never happened, and that officer needs to go to jail without making it about there's a huge issue with the police force, there's rampant racism running through the police force. I think that's where um, solutions start ending because those are emotional things that don't necessarily lead to solutions. And the reason why I'm bringing it up is because you started bringing in overseer to police
I'm drawing
officer
a
and all
through
these kinds of
line
things.
because there's a pattern that, if we want to talk about patterns of incidents recently, that dynamic has been around since black people were brought into this country, of a white superior punishing and publicly executing, lynching. That's the reason why people protest. That dynamic. It's whenever that dynamic occurs and it's blatantly uncalled for because the black man is unarmed, instantly you're going to get a race reaction, because if that dynamic didn't occur back in the during the slave trade, then we wouldn't feel so sensitive about it. Uh, so I always want to keep that in connection, because at the end of the day, this country's been around for 500 years. 450 of those years, black people were not given their full right to live. 400 of those years, they're considered less than a man. So, relative to the grand scheme of things, I never want to lose that perspective. There's a historical context here. That's why in
Sure.
history books, people are going to talk about this year. But uh, I will say that it's a good thing that we're able to draw the power aspect of this. That's That's it. That's an unemotional conversation. You and I are able to step away from that and just look at the things that what logically went wrong there. And I 100% agree with you. In this case, there's a
Because I would say I would hope that everybody would be just as upset as if the races were switched. If it was a black cop on a white person underneath, or a Mexican cop on an Asian, like hopefully that everybody's just as upset. Because to me, obviously, there's a racial component because it's black white and all the points that you just brought along, which makes it an emotional thing. But regardless of if it wasn't a racial thing, this is still a horrible abuse of power, where somebody overstepped their what I think should be their boundaries of power to where somebody lost their life. A man lost their life,
exactly.
and regardless of what the racial component is, which is obviously there just because of everything you just brought up as far as our history of
It's
how African
Yeah. It's why
Americans were treated
mostly
and stuff
black
like that.
people are protesting. They're affected by this.
Sure. Well, I mean, as far as what's being seen on television, it looks like only black people are
No, not only. I
protesting,
said
right?
that's why mostly black people are
Well,
affected
mostly.
by this.
Well, that's what I'm going across. I This issue more than this video, more than any of the other videos that have come out in the past 4 weeks, seems, at least from my limited scope, has been the most uniting out of all of them. I haven't seen pretty much literally zero comments. I have seen maybe one I've seen of somebody that's like, let's wait for more information, or trying to like try to defend the cop in that situation.
I,
It's one of the
I'm seeing
when I look at
a lot of them in the
well,
very very conservative side.
when I saw Ahmed Arbery's thing, there was so many on either side.
Uh,
When I saw
right, right.
the
The
Cooper thing,
circumstances are not as clear cut in this case until this case.
right? So what I'm saying is, I don't want this to just be a black white issue. Like black people are the only I want it to be a human issue. Is the fact that this could happen to anybody. It didn't have to be a black man. It could be anybody where an overzealous cop can take your life and unchecked because they have the blue shield, right? And that's where the fear comes, is when you can't trust the cops to do the right thing, then who can you trust? And that's, I think, what the underlying issue needs to be looked at, because that's the only way it's going to be solved. When we
Okay,
take it as just a go ahead. I'm sorry.
I'll just throw in my last 2 cents on this because I think we're going to probably agree to disagree. But um, I look at it as a power issue in in this environment of race. Yeah, the issue at hand was literally a man was overpowering and excessively using his knee to kill him. But that's why I said it was so hard for me to not watch the video with color, trying to watch it in neutral. You just can't because we live in the United States of America. We don't live in any other country where, like, when was the last time you saw an all Indian protest because an Indian man was killed wrongfully in this country, or an
Those don't
Asian.
make headline news, my guy.
When was the last time you saw it?
You will never see it. It doesn't make
We don't
headline
say
news.
never, but uh,
What I'm saying is,
in this country, go ahead.
if you look at actual stats of who gets killed the most by police, it's not black people. It's actually white people by a significant margin, like over double, triple. But
I'm
you're
not
not
going to
going to see
argue
that.
statistics about where things are happening more because at the end of the day, there's still a majority white people, and uh, it's not about how many blacks are killing blacks, how many whites are killing blacks. We still live in a country where there was 400 years of slavery, 450 years
Sure.
of slavery. To just be so, uh, uh, you know, I guess, presumptive that the race doesn't matter in this is, it's denying that the history of this country didn't unravel the way it did. Uh, and
I don't think
there's
it's wrong to.
really
Well,
quickly,
you
just let me
said
get in
being
my last point
okay.
here. We we will always, until the ugliest fingerprints of racism have been removed from the banking industry, from the real estate industry, from the police force, from the government, until all racism is removed, it's we cannot have the luxury of calling this strictly an isolated power incident, because with this country comes those protesting black men and women. To ignore the act of protest. Oh yeah, it's so easy to get caught up in the looting because these are poor black people, poor white people, poor brown people in the area taking advantage, whatever. We still have an issue of whenever a white person with authority does something and hurts a black person who's in a state of weakness, it's going to trigger that emotion. And we can't just assume that, oh, the fix is only going to be a power fix. Uh, you know,
On the flip side, I don't think you could automatically assume it there
but
that
people are not protesting for any other race. When a black officer does something extremely bad, I don't remember the last time, and it happens. Black officers do bad things all the time.
every
Uh,
like humans do wrong things all the
right,
time,
right, and
whether
then
you're black, white, Indian,
sure,
Asian.
but when there's the potential for a white person in authority to take advantage of a person of color, that will, because this country was built on the backs of slave labor. It's you can't just disassociate it just because we're choosing to have the more intellectual conversation. The emotion will come with it. We can't cut it loose. So the big troubling element of isolating an issue in a police force is because there's a camaraderie there. They don't want to, you talk about teams, like a police force has to rely on each other for their lives, right? Because they're
Sure.
protecting each other. They're protecting the community, Lord willing, but they're also protecting each other. So to feel like this guy doesn't have my back anymore because you know, for whatever reason, that's something that needs to be like, that's where my attention is how to best educate and thoroughly filter out the process of becoming a police officer, because it seems like there's too much, whether you want to call it bad training or not. This guy seemed like a seasoned vet, the way his history was. I think he's had arresting issues since 2000s, the early 2000s, right? He's
Right.
shot at people who were, I don't know whatever the specific cases were, but he's been written up several times. So he's been around the block and then some. So whatever his behavior is, it may be just power, but it may be race and power. It could be we don't know until this person is only he knows what's in his head and heart.
Sure. That's
Um,
what I'm saying. And that's what I'm saying is if you want to look at this as like what problem can actually be solved, because making somebody not racist that is racist, I don't know if there's that many solutions to that. But as far as unchecked power, I think one of the biggest issues is what you brought up. There's this blue shield, and where officers protect officers, right?
right.
You hear about all the stories about like, domestic violence issues where cops don't get written up. Women are afraid because they know they can't call a cop to
it's
save
it's
them
like the
because
company privilege. It's like, oh, I get hooked up at this
sure,
store, so me and my boys are always gonna get hooked up at this store. That's our
right.
thing.
So they have the get out of jail free card or
That's a very
be able to.
alarming, unchecked. Yeah,
And so the solution is the cops can't be above the law, and the laws have to change where you can actually, um, the mentality in the police force needs to change. That culture needs to
the
change. That
culture of the police
look, we
force.
can't, we can't, we can't keep just protecting. Like we need to, the police need to police themselves basically to weed out these cops because if it is a racist cop, cops know that this person is a racist if they have, you could tell for the most part if you're spending time with somebody and communicating with them on a
Eventually,
regular
they'll let their
basis.
feelings out, their true
Sure,
feelings. Yeah.
especially if you're a cop, you're supposed to have instincts. You're supposed to be able to read people. Like you should be able to tell, this is somebody who may handle situations the wrong way, or this is somebody who, may look at like may do something in a racial way, or just maybe somebody that can't handle pressure, and if they're pushed in a certain way, they might go, overstep their boundaries. But regardless of it, laws need to change to where you know police aren't protected to where they're above the law, and maybe it's not the laws because the laws are
It's
there, I'm
not the
sure,
laws.
but it's more like the culture within the police force that hey, we're gonna actually to create the trust that we're losing trust with society because cops are overstepping their boundary, and whether it's isolated in just issues, it's enough to where the media's it's in front of people's faces where they know this stuff is happening. We need to police our own. We need to get the bad apples out of here so that we could rebuild that trust, because at the end of the day, we do need police. We can't be a society that doesn't have
Sure.
police. But once we have a force that we can't trust, that's when chaos happens. That's why all this
Right.
stuff is happening is because they don't feel like they could trust the police, and they're
Right.
angry,
That's
and they don't know any other way of and people don't feel any other way of releasing that
sure.
through what's going on right now.
Yeah, and one of my solutions with having a better trust between the police officers and the community is it's a gentle segregation, which means the hiring and assigning of officers to communities should be based on, if this is a black police officer from this community, let's try to keep him in that community because he knows the people. He actually cares about these people. He has sensitivity to these people. Okay, yeah, there may be some slight favoritism that happens. That's a natural human thing, but I'd rather that slight favoritism happen and save lives and build a healthy relationship with officers and civilians, especially younger, like young males, right? That's who we're consistently, they're the most influential. And then you see the statistics, um, have these relationships built based on, hey, he looks like me, that'd be such a, I think it's a very low and easy to do move. It's low maintenance. There doesn't need to be a whole rehaul of the police force. Put people in their own communities. Obviously, the vetting, the sensitivity, the psychology, all these tests need to be stronger. But a very low, easy level tactic is police your own, because then we won't have the element of race. We can't get fired up over that, right? How many, we're talking about saving, these businesses and people protesting. We won't see any of that. We'll see very little of that because people who make mistakes strictly because they just made a mistake on their job or they have anger issues, that's not going to unify people and create, divisions and, uh, you know, have media coverage. So that's, it's a low hanging fruit, which, it
Well,
baffles
they've
me.
tried that before, and they had to change that policy for a couple of reasons. So there was a couple of things. One, you kind of brought it up. There was
There's going to be
it was
nepotism,
easy for
favoritism. Yeah.
well, there was corruption actually, where a lot of these there were situations where um, because you grew up with somebody, this person became a cop, this person became, let's say, for example, a drug dealer. Now all of a sudden they're best friends, they're good friends or whatever. Now all of a sudden they have it was easier to have those type of corruption go on that was happening. So right now we're seeing this situation, but previous maybe like back maybe like 20, 30 years, police corruption was a huge thing. And so the way that they got rid of that, or the way that they started as a reaction to so much police corruption with, getting kickbacks and
I
all
mean,
these types of things, they had to change that where you couldn't police in the areas that you grew up because of that
sure,
situation.
but
The
it's not a
second
given.
thing
The
is,
corruption still exists. It's out there.
sure, but there was like back, where the movies like L.A. Confidential, American Gangster, like it was huge, like rampant to the point where they had to overhaul everything, and laws like this got reversed, or practices like this got reversed to get rid of that. But the second thing is, uh, they it was people sometimes. Well, what was happening where police officers that were getting in the force were didn't want to work in these areas. They came from that area. They didn't want to work in that area because they had to go back to those people, and they felt unsafe for their lives to be a police officer policing in that neighborhood because everybody knew them. So they didn't want to work in those areas. They wanted to work in other areas
Okay.
for two reasons. One, because of safety reasons, but the second thing is they didn't want to. They knew they were going to be put in more dangerous situations working in this impoverished areas where crime seems to be more. They wanted to be able to go to a differing neighborhood where it was more safe. They felt like they were kind of being punished working in those areas where there's more crime, that they had to deal with that versus going to like a suburban area where there wasn't going to be as much crime. It's an easier day for them, right? So there was all these issues that were coming up. It was actually the police union that said they didn't want that anymore. So it's not like a simple solution where it's like, let's just change this. It's not like all police are in favor of that. In fact,
Okay,
most are
take
opposed to
location
that.
aside. I would still argue gentle segregation and put black officers in. They don't have to be from that area, but put them in the areas where there may be more black population. If there's a white officer, put them in places where there's more white population, Latino, Asian, so on and so forth. They don't necessarily have to be directly from it, but just so you can remove the element of race from it, like it's, you know,
But that's you assuming that black officers want to work in those areas. So it has to be like has to be kind of like, it would be nice if there's a simple solution was like, hey, I'm a black officer, I want to work in this black neighborhood. I'm a white officer, I want to work in this white neighborhood. But then again, we're already painting the brush of racism with the
that's why I'm calling
solution
it a
of
gentle
looking at it
segregation,
racist.
and that's not racism. That's segregation. That's separation, equal but different opportunity here. The black officer and the white officers have the same rights. They get hired the same way. It's just based on safety and prevention of race riots. If that's going to be the main reason that we even talk about this, then assign people who look like a certain race, if race is a thing, into those communities, regardless of if they're from there or not. Obviously, you want to avoid that situation if their neighborhood, they grew up and they know a drug dealer perhaps. And again, I don't want to discount the fact that there can be corruption even now, because it's, if you want to say that abuse of power is the issue, then at any
Sure.
point, at any stop, you can see a policeman using excessive force just because he has the ability to. So my intention is strictly to build race relations and find some sort of band-aid, because, like, let's be clear,
I,
putting George Floyd's killer in jail, putting the other three officers in jail to whatever length sentences, what will that really do? Will that make a
I think it
racist
puts
white
fear.
person? Will that make a racist white person say, "Oh shit, I could, if this could happen to this officer and be put in jail for his racism, alleged, then maybe I need to change my." I'm not gonna see that happen. I'm not seeing that happen in many cases. I think, if I want to find some silver lining, perhaps I've not seen as many white people be so vocal about race relations before, and just about, the dynamic of it, and of it not happening, just staying clear of, a white person in authority exerting excessive force and killing a person of color. I mean, uh, I can't deny the fact that, it's created uh, I guess a unifying point. You and I differ on a lot of political issues, but uh, we both feel that what happened was very unjust.
Sure.
And so, um, yeah, I mean, it's
But I think it's a dangerous precedent when you use the word, when you use the term light segregation. I think you used
gentle
it right.
segregation.
Gentle segregation,
Use your
like,
common sense, man. This
yeah,
job
but
is
I
such a
don't.
nuanced job, and
Yeah, but it's not. But that's what I'm saying. Now all of a sudden, so we're looking at it only from one angle, that there's that cops are racist,
no, 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 I
right?
didn't.
Or that
I'm giving
there's
you a low hanging fruit solution to remove race from the potential. I still agreed that that was my first instinct before I saw
no,
the
no. I'm,
video.
I'm I'm not I'm not attacking him. What I'm saying is, like, we're only that solution's only looking at it
That's
as
gonna
far
filter out
as,
the race problem. All the racist
sure.
cops are gonna be instantly removed of any opportunity to commit racist, violent acts, while with a badge, while getting paid.
I mean, that's only if we're painting the brush that black people only live in this neighborhood, white people only live in this
I mean,
neighborhood, like,
when it
which
comes
which
to
isn't the necessary case, right? There's gonna be,
that's denying a lot of the effects of redlining. We're still seeing it. There are majority black neighborhoods in LA. Like, for us to not acknowledge that, it'd be ignorant. There's majority in black neighborhoods in
sure, but
Minnesota.
that's what I'm saying. It's a majority, but it's not like if a white if you only put a racist white cop in a white neighborhood, they're never going to come across a black person. Will it minimize it? Maybe. I
That's the
don't know. But
goal.
like, but what I'm saying is, it's just a dangerous precedent to put because we're looking at it in one angle, but
I
then
think this is a
that could
dangerous
be.
precedent right now. The potential for racist killings.
But racist killings are going to happen as long as there's racism,
But
right?
there will be
There's
more if
racist
you
killing.
continue to allow people of one color, namely white police officers, in neighborhoods with mostly black people. This potential for a race riot
But
will only happen if this incident keeps
once
happening.
again, you're already assuming that this guy was a racist,
I'm saying
right? That this is a
this is
race
the
killing.
solution to prevent these types of killings, or at least minimize it to the fact that these opportunities will be almost zeroed out. Almost.
As far as the optics, or as far as the actual incident,
As far as these
because as far
incidents.
as cops killing killing people, I don't think putting a black cop in a black neighborhood and a white cop in a white neighborhood is going to mean there's going to be less cops killing
No,
people.
no, no. Less white cops killing black people.
Okay,
This is
but
a
like I said,
solution to
once again,
that. This is a solution to reduce the number of
just
white
as far as
cops killing.
optics, that's just optics, right?
If there are potential racist police officers on a
Because that,
force, this will
sure.
remove the potential for them to be committing acts of violent racism on civilians.
So one, but that's what I'm saying. We don't know if it's a rampant racism thing or if
Whatever
it's
the
a.
amount of racism is, this country, again,
But you're looking at optics.
this country
That's what it
doesn't
is. It's
function
not about
without
solving the
race. This
problem.
country doesn't function without race. The
What do you mean doesn't
dynamic has
function?
been existing long enough. The dynamic of a
Doesn't
white person
function?
in authority,
It doesn't function without race. What do you mean by that?
meaning the whole reason people are protesting is because there's a racial feeling behind
Sure,
this.
sure.
To reduce and eliminate potentially the chances of these incidents happening, to not give any white police officer the chance and any black police officer the chance to kill a person of another race, however, whatever colors you want. Unfortunately, this country comes with the baggage of racism. Black people will protest every time a black person is killed by a white police officer. There's a reason why the names come so quickly to the tip of your tongue. It's not just
But
because
that's
media is fanning flames here.
it
No, it's
is
not.
because media is panning
Bro,
flames.
we're
Okay.
using the internet. When have you turned your TV on? You search on Twitter what you want. There's a reason
About
why
what?
people are retweeting this video.
Sure.
There's a reason why people's Instagram posts are dedicated to George Floyd. It's not because nobody's asking you to share some incident that happened that didn't involve a white police officer killing a black man. You chose not to do it.
That's not true. There's not a video of all those stuff.
There's videos of other things going on
So
right now,
you're
but
trying. So you're. So you could. One, I don't want to minimize the fact that there is racism. I don't want to minimize the fact that there is components of race, like whenever the optics of a white cop killing a black person. I understand why that triggers people in a different way, especially seeing that it
450
triggers
years of
people.
slavery, man. That's it.
Sure, but to sit there and I guess say that okay, all of us the solution is let's
That's a low level
segregate.
solution. Low level solution. It's not going to wipe out the
Okay,
issue. I have
sure,
solutions for the root of the issue too.
sure. So, but what I'm saying is to not think that. So the reason why cops get such a bad name is because there are videos of cops doing the right thing. They don't get as many retweets as
Death
a cop
as
doing a wrong
no, no.
thing.
In this case, death. A cop committing a murder.
Sure.
Murder is
But
newsworthy.
if there's cops saving a life, which there's videos of that, doesn't get as many retweets as a cop killing somebody. Would you agree?
I would argue that more than any other profession, more than a doctor, because guess what? There are racist doctors who are letting certain patients die. There are racist nurses who are not giving certain patients the attention they need. If you look at the pregnancy numbers, black mothers have died in hospitals far more than any others. they are treated worse. The racism exists in a lot of professions. This country is not removed from racism still. It exists because 450 years to 25, 30, 40, 50 years, it just doesn't compare. In the profession of policing, you are automatically held to an extreme standard because death is at your fingertips. You are given
Sure,
permission to make the judgment call of whether this person poses a threat and I should eliminate him, or if I should just calmly approach him and put his hands behind his back. So you look
sure.
at a Dylan Roof, you look at these white shooters with rifles being politely escorted out, sometimes given meals. And then you look at the handling of this case, you know? It's to ignore the race is, I think, a denial of this country's reality.
But it's also used in both ways. Like you could even see in this situation, um, people started posting up this meme with the officer and then another person that kind of looked like him with a "Make America White" hat, and just all, which is has been debunked because it's somebody that's not the officer, but they're saying, look, proof that this person was a racist, right? So you look at that situation and it's like,
It's not,
okay, well,
that's just another symptom. That's the same as rioting and looting. People online are just looking desperately
but
to
it's
attach to something, connect.
make it connected to a racist
But again,
act,
the
right?
issue at hand is before all of this. It is people in positions of authority who have death at their fingertips.
Sure. So that's why I
They
think
should be
the
given zero opportunity to commit a racial act of violence. And to eliminate that, you
you
you do
you
your best to put officers in communities where they look like the people there. They don't have to be from there, but you will eliminate as much as possible the racial element. You will. It's a
I mean,
gentle segregation. It doesn't have to be explicit. Obviously, a smart police chief can know a stand-up, good-hearted person, whether he's black, white, brown, doesn't matter. I have that kind of common instincts.
but
I can tell a good person from a
what I'm
bad
saying,
person.
the fact that we're even having this conversation is because so you're already saying that this was a racist killing.
I didn't say
That's what I'm
this was a
saying.
racist killing, but the fact that you're having thousands of people marching, that you're having this reaction, it automatically is a race issue. The killing may have been a power
Sure. So
struggle,
it's for
bro. I don't
optics.
care
So it's
about
for
that.
you're
I'm
saying
talking.
optics. That's all this you're saying to change the optics of the situation
The
to
optics
not
in
have a
this case
video.
are a reality because people are protesting and committing
Sure.
acts of vandalism and theft. Which as last time I checked, all that shit is very low compared to murder.
So
I'm
if we're
trying to
talking
prevent
about
racial murder here. This is a solution to the problem that's being discussed. This is what Colin Kaepernick was protesting. Police brutality. White
sure,
police officers taking advantage of unarmed black men and killing them. Killing them before they have a chance.
police brutality, unchecked power, overstepping the boundaries definitely is an issue. If one innocent person or one person that doesn't deserve to be killed
Is worth
got
more than
killed,
whatever's been stolen. Let's just be clear. Whatever goods are stolen after the fact, peace. You want to save that money? You want to save this insurance cost that Target's going to have to file claims for? Then you put the white officers in the white neighborhoods, black officers in black neighborhoods. You won't have race riots anymore. That solves all your problems, all your business problems. I'm talking about fixing the race problem, man. I've read enough about racism to know that this country just doesn't turn a blind eye and continue and act like everything's roses.
and I think that just extends the race problem.
Bro,
Because to
why
me,
are people
you don't
protesting?
solve.
It's a race problem.
What I'm saying is, of course, there's gonna be all of these situations that happen, but every time something happens, when was the last race riot? Is there one every single year? Is there one every single month? Is there one every single week? No, they happen, right? There's this one. There's Ferguson. There was, they happen for sure. But to sit there and say that there's a race riot every single week or every
I
single
never said
month
any
or
of that.
but what I'm saying is you're handling it like this is a problem that happens all the time as far as race riots. That's not a problem. We
Uh,
shouldn't. One
I'm
of my
giving
one
the solution to what a lot of segments of society think is the only issue here. That's what I'm giving a solution to. And
but it
in giving that solution, I'm also giving a solution to what the racial issue here is too. To prevent racial reactions, to prevent people of color from feeling like white people are white officers are threatening my life, you reduce the number of white officers in positions to threaten those lives. It's a
Yeah, but
simple
that doesn't solve
solution,
the problem.
but it's a better solution than anything else that's on the table.
That's but how can that be said? What
If you want to
solutions do you know that are
prevent
on the
white
table right now?
officers from killing black lives, and you
You
want to
educate
okay, you're not going to convert a racist. You're not going to convert him.
for sure, but
How can you educate a racist?
I don't think every white person on the force is a
Guess
racist.
what? It's not about every white person. It's about the white officers who have killed
Sure,
black men.
no, it's about racist officers that have killed whatever it is. It's not a white
Guess what?
officer.
It doesn't matter if
A white officer that kills a black man, if that is if that white officer, if there's a black guy that's holding a gun at somebody or shoots at a cop and that cop shoots back, whether it be white, brown, whatever, if that other person that's shooting at the cop is white, brown, whatever,
shooting back.
that cop could kill that. So that's a white officer killing a black officer.
Unarmed
We're
black
saying
man. We're talking about unarmed black man here. That's an armed
sure,
black man or armed colored person.
sure,
Whatever the thing is.
whatever that race, it doesn't have to be race. But what I'm saying is the only way to change, you don't change a situation from ignoring the situation. There needs to be more trust built between police and the black community for sure.
Which
There has
police?
to
All
be.
police in the black community?
Yes, all police, because
That's fair.
at the end of the day, they're not saying fuck white cops.
Okay.
They're saying fuck cops. They're saying fuck the pigs. They're not delineating race. It's a cop versus minorities in certain demographics that have. There's been aggressive policing in these neighborhoods that have created it. What I'm saying is that there needs to be more trust built with that. There needs to be more understanding. There needs to be more all of that kind of stuff. What your
My
solution does
solution falls in
is
line with trust. I'm more likely to trust a Bengali police officer than I am a white police officer or a black police officer. In fact, I'm more likely to trust a black police officer just by nature of my experiences with the law. I've been asked if I have a bomb in my car.
okay, but I mean that's fine. But what I'm saying is, at the end of the day, that by just removing the white person from the situation doesn't build that trust between a white officer and you. Because
Uh,
at the end of the day, there's not going to be a police force
Guess
full of
what?
Bengali
Whatever.
people or black people or white people.
In Queens, New York, there's Bengali police officers.
No, I'm saying there's not going to be a police force of just Bengali people, of just black people, of just white people.
Okay,
So
we're
at the end
addressing
of
the
the day,
black versus white. I'm addressing the black versus white issue, and also
sure.
helping to prevent unnecessary racial protest and struggle.
But anytime there's solutions being made, there's going to be times that it blows up. Like
I'm
at
reducing
the
it.
end of,
I'm reducing the number in my
but
proposition.
but in that situation, it's not solving the underlying problem. It's just extending the problem. Because at the end of the day, a black
Doing nothing
the
is extending the problem.
sure, but I'm not saying I don't think the solution is you either do light segregation or you do nothing. That's not on the
You're saying
table.
build
What
trust. I'm giving you an opportunity to build trust within your own community based on similar race, and then if you can actually see
but
some success
you're
there, then you
assuming
can
you're
bring in
assuming
mixed race police officers.
but you're assuming that people are just because they see somebody of the same race automatically are are less fearful because of the same race. At the end
That's
of the day,
probably
if you afraid,
studied and proven general human reaction.
I think that there's a certain sector of people that are being affected here that are afraid of all police. They're not afraid of or like, oh, it's a black police officer. I don't have to be afraid. There's I don't think that that's a
Building
thought
trust in
process.
race relations will be easier with people of similar color. We're trying to
But
tackle two like difficult
because it became,
problems here, and
well,
the police
in
problem
my
and the racial problem, right? We're not just
sure,
trying to fix one. And my solution is let's work on the race problem first and then get to the police problem. Checking power is more difficult in this country based on how the Constitution is written, based strictly because of the right to bear arms. That makes things very
sure.
complicated, and my solution is strictly to reduce as many racially charged and potentially racially provoked killings uh, as possible. And this is a broad stroke, but I think it's possible. I think it's It will reduce the number of incidents. It won't eliminate nothing at this point can be proven to eliminate any of it because at the end of the day, power has the propensity to be corrupt. Anybody in power, and
So the underlying issue is, how do we bring there be a fair uh how are there repercussions for cops that overstep their boundaries? That's the real solution in my eyes.
that will
Because
come.
at the
That
end
will
of the
come.
day, but that's what I'm saying. Once there's a deterrent, right now there's not a real deterrent for cops to overstep their boundaries, right? Most cops that we see in these huge cases, they're getting let off, right? Whether it be
The
Zimmerman,
DA is usually in
now
bed with the
sure,
police force.
there's this hierarchy of just protect your own type of situations. This DA owed this cop a favor because they did something that
They
helped
want to
this other
maintain
DA
their
win their
trust in each
case.
other.
Exactly. So what needs to change is, regardless of if you put black cops here, white cops there, cops cops that are you doing police brutality are going to be doing police brutality regardless of the race, because at the end of the day they overstep their boundaries when it comes to power. They're looking for a way to exert power. That's where the brutality part comes from, right? So they need, the only way to rectify that situation is if there's a deterrent to that. If I could get away with things regardless of any repercussions, it only takes me as a person, my morality, to then police that. If I don't have a morality, then I'm trusting that my morality is my morals are there to police that. But we can't trust that, because obviously we're seeing police officers take it into their own hands. There needs to be a deterrent to police officers doing the wrong things, and that's what needs to change. Whether you put a white officer there or a black officer there and all these kinds of things, yeah, that changes the optics. So maybe you won't see as many videos, or
The
you
optics
won't.
that led to this situation that we're in as well. It will also prevent all of this.
But also, what could have prevented all of this is if immediately right after the situation happened, the officers did get fired, but then there was a serious, like, these officers were arrested right after, question, put into cuffs and awaiting or awaiting trial. That would have shown that, okay, look, this is a horrible thing, but these officers aren't going to get away with it, because at the end of the day, the initial riots for Rodney King were because happened after the cops got away with it, right? They didn't initially riot when the beatings were happening. The anger comes from the fact that the society, black people, think these cops are going to get away with it because they've seen it happen too many times where the cops got away with it, whether it be Zimmerman, whether it be the Rodney King case, and
And Zimmerman was not a
however
police
many
officer.
cases.
I thought he was just like a
No, he
local.
was a cop.
I thought he was just like this hired security.
No, Zimmerman was a cop.
Okay, I think I might have to double check on that one.
Yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying. Like, it's the fear of feeling like this can happen unchecked that's causing the situation. Because if people knew that if cops did the wrong thing, they would get punished, just like if you and I were to do the wrong thing, we'd get punished, there would be more trust in the cops. Because look, you can't just be a cop and get away with it. Right now, that's how most people feel. If a cop does something, they know how to hide it, they know how to cover it up. They're gonna write a different police report. They're gonna have their friends plant evidence, all these types of things, remove evidence. That's what the issue is. And until we could see justice happen and know that, okay, if a cop oversteps their boundary, I know that the system's going to treat them just like anybody else. That's when people can start trusting. Because just because there's an officer there's an officer that looks like me, if that officer is corrupt, it doesn't matter what color they are, they could still get away with it because they're a cop. They're not getting away with it because of their race. They're getting away with it because of the color of their uniform. They're getting away with it because of the badge. They're getting away with it because of the profession that they have. And that's what the issue needs to be. It's not that black cops are getting thrown in jail, but white cops are getting away with it. All cops can get away with it. So that's what the problem is that there's a fear that cops could get away with crimes if they do things the way they are. And it's showing up right now. Right now, the DA came out and is kind of putting the seeds out there that look, these guys might not be prosecuted. There may be evidence to exonerate them, and that's when people are going to go ballistic because it's like, how can a badge give you the right to murder? And that's where I think the main thing is. We could keep bringing up the race thing. You're right, it's there. But if we keep painting every problem with race, we're getting no solutions because, like you said, there's no solutions to change a racist. Most racists are ever going to be non-racist. We could try to segregate, separate, all these kinds of things, but at the
I
end of the
think
day, we
we
all got
should
to live
try. We
together.
should try. We should try. It Policing is such a sensitive line of work that it requires like that level of precaution. Hey, there's a chance that this racist guy on my force, he's a good cop, he knows all the protocol, but there's a chance that he may take advantage in this community. So you know what? I'll keep him on this block. If I'm a police chief, that's like a no-brainer for me. I could save potentially so much. Like these the police cars are being damaged, the police offices are being vandalized too. Like it's just a
Right.
common sense thing for me. At that point, I would think, hey, there's a less chance for a race riot if I put my officers in certain places accordingly. So, I mean,
But that's like saying that you already think this person's gonna kill somebody. If you think that this officer would kill somebody in the wrong way, they shouldn't be an officer.
not
It's not
necessarily
like,
kill.
oh,
It's like you said,
or
when
do
you're around
anything.
somebody long enough, you can tell their racial cues
Sure.
start showing.
If there's a racist cop that would kill somebody or do something out of a racial insecurity of that person shouldn't be on the force anyways,
It's hard to
because then they're
catch.
only
And
but that
unfortunately,
but
not every police chief
but the
is
but
not
the thing
racist
is,
either.
if that situation happens, and a situation like this happens, let's say that this cop is a racist, right? And he killed this person not only because he committed a crime, but he handled it in that way because that George Floyd is black. Let's just assume that that is the
Sure, the
situation.
worst case scenario here.
This person should be in jail. He should go to jail. And any cop, even if it was a black officer that killed George Floyd in the same way, he should go to jail.
I agree.
The problem is that officers aren't going to jail. That's the problem. The problem with police brutality isn't only a race thing. Police
But it
brutality is they
exists.
could get
I'm not
away with
denying
it.
that it exists.
But you're talking about the
I have
minuscule
solutions for
problem
the police
versus
force
the
too.
bigger
Yeah,
problem.
yeah. I No,
The
I
bigger
agree.
problem
They
is,
go hand in hand, bro.
unchecked power.
The police
No,
force
that,
was
that the problem.
mostly racist up until the 70s and 80s.
But we're talking about now, man. We're
Yeah,
talking
it
about
hasn't been
now.
so
The
long.
solution.
There are
But
still plenty of racist police
what
officers,
I'm saying
man.
is,
It still exists.
every time we make it a racist thing, we're gonna keep seeing situations like Jussie Smollett, who came out and made a completely fake story because he's fawning that people are going to get triggered by racism, because anytime that you put a white person got attacked a black person, you could get media news about it. People are going to believe you without
It goes
question,
both
because
ways. The Coopers, it was a white woman feeling like she was being
100%,
attacked by a black person.
100%, 100%. But that's because every single time a situation happens, we talk about race. We talk about race, we talk about race, we talk about race. Is racism there? Absolutely. Is this problem a thing with racism? Who knows? But what I do know is there can be laws that make it so that an officer that oversteps his boundaries, does things the wrong way, uses excessive force, should go to jail. Whether that officer's white, whether that officer's Mexican, whether that officer's black, that's the solution. Not constantly keep playing into racism, 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 racism. Because at the end of the day, that all that does is make people feel better. It doesn't actually change anything. Because if there's a bad cop, if he's a bad black cop, he's still gonna kill
I would argue the opposite. Racism makes
black
people feel
people.
worse. There are so many triggered black people right now. They're feeling horrible about the situation. They're feeling
Because
horrible enough to go protest.
a black person got killed. Now, obviously, the optics are that it was by a white officer, right? But I think it's any officer. Hopefully, they get just as triggered if it was any officer killing a unarmed person, right? Why is it just a thing if it's a white officer? No,
Because
with
there's a
this
history.
video,
There's a history.
because I think there was recently a black officer that killed an unarmed young girl, black girl,
Oh,
right?
went into her into their apartment. Is that the one you're talking
No, no,
about?
no. That's a different case. That's a no knock permit. I'm talking about a young girl was killed by a black officer. No innocent, just like I don't know the details of the situation, but it was a innocent girl that wasn't committing a crime or anything like that, was killed by a black officer, straight shooting, whatever the case may be, whatever it is, I don't know what it is, but there's no national news about it because it doesn't play into the racism
Was
thing.
there a video?
No,
I
I
mean,
don't think
if
so.
there was a video, that might help.
Yeah, but still, it should be national news. Unarmed black
Did
kid was
you? I
killed
mean, if you heard about it, then it was national news. It reached you if you're in another state.
through somebody that it was how I found out about it was uh some a black person on Twitter that tweeted it out, and it's like we are getting played because all they ever want to show is when when white people kill black people. They would never want to show they don't care about all black people. They just care about black people that are getting killed by white people. The media is what they're saying, because the media doesn't cover when it's anything other than there's some kind of race relation in it, because that's what gets the most clicks, that's what gets the most views, that's what gets the most retweets, that's what gets all that kind of stuff.
The
They're
media
playing into
doesn't
the emotion,
retweet. We retweet.
which is what I'm saying is those are the stories they're going to cover because they know when they put a clip up of it, that's going to get retweeted. That's how they make their money. So they're not going to put up a story that they don't feel like is going to get retweeted as much.
This
And that's the
story was retweeted as much as it was is because there's clear cut evidence on video. I agree
sure,
that racial dynamic magnifies it, but the fact that it was an execution on video,
sure,
it allowed for people to identify with the victim and say he looks like me and this isn't right. This should never happen. It made it uh, a throbbing heartbeat to this anger, whatever that we're seeing here is. So I don't, you know, just chalk this up to the media blowing such
I
story
think
up
it's a
right now.
police issue. I think what I look at
This
it
can
as
be
is
a
a
police
police
and a race
issue.
issue. To ignore the race would be foolish.
I mean, I
There
don't
are
know.
white
I
police
mean,
officers who exert excessive force on people of color more so because they're racist. The position of a police officer has only recently been regulated, right? To fight corruption in the last 20 years or so. That job
right,
historically has been held by white people in power, and they're exerting power. So
sure,
the racial component will always be attached until we're another 300, 400 years down the line, man. But, uh, you know, in a broader conversation, as far as how police officers should be holding themselves accountable, it all comes down to leadership. And I want to apologize for sometimes generalizing and saying that, oh, black people need a powerful leader to look up to. I think white people need a powerful and morally righteous leader to look up to as well. Somebody who holds themselves to the highest level of accountability, and then the people in Congress, they will take the lead. The people in the military, the people in in the police force, the fire departments, everyone can look up to somebody who's setting the gold standard for how to tell the truth, for how to do your job without, taking advantage of others, for not abusing power, unchecked power. It's funny. It's a theme in a lot of the other stories that are also occurring with the government's control over online media. So the theme is definitely there. I'm not arguing with you on that aspect of the issue. It's a huge component, um, and you know I don't think that, again, bringing justice to George Floyd is going to resolve the greater. It's just going to give people an emotional release, like, oh, justice was served in this case. In the
well,
greater scheme of things, uh, there, I guess it's going to start with each of us looking in the mirror as citizens of this country. We want this country to reflect the best thing possible, and it's to these are moments of truth for a leader to step up and say, look, you know, everyone who reports to me, this is how you do your job. You know, this is how you save lives. This is how you gain trust. This is how you become a place where people want to live and be happy. So I hope that this opportunity arises for that leader. But yeah, man, I wanted to offer the table to you as well in your last
Yeah,
thoughts.
like yeah, my biggest thing is, you know, obviously if you if you're looking at two different what the underlying problem is, if you're looking at the underlying problem is racism, or you're looking at the underlying problem is police brutality or unchecked power, um, there's going to be different solutions to that, right? So my whole thing about this is I think that unchecked power with a police officer that feels like they could get away with any crime, that doesn't see race. That's just
Amen.
anybody. So that's the thing that we need to be attacking. And if these police officers somehow get off, these police officers don't have to sit in court, um, being judged by a jury of their peers, and people and the family of George Floyd doesn't get the opportunity to seek justice for their loved one because he was killed by a cop. That's a that's not a racial issue. That's a human issue because that could happen to anybody if a cop can get away with murder. And I think that's the issue that we need to be focused on. That's the issue that we need to be solving because, like I said, police brutality is this thing. Any unchecked power is going to lead to issues. That's why our government set up the way that it is. That's why organizations are set up the way they are so that nobody could get too powerful so that they could take over everything kind of thing. And that's where it seems like the police have gone in certain areas. So we need to see police come out and speak up against this type of behavior. We need to see the courts come out and prosecutors prosecute these police officers for all these things. And I think that's the way that we start repairing stuff, because if we know that cops are held accountable, then we could trust them more, knowing that if they ever step out of bounds, that they'll be held accountable for that. And that's
Uh,
basically how I see
I
things.
co-sign everything you said about the solution to it. Uh, again, the race we cannot deny because who was there's one black officer that I've seen publicly come out and make a pretty like well executed statement. I haven't seen a
Hmm.
white officer do that yet. Uh,
At least hasn't been
I'm waiting on it. Hey, I'm
circulated.
waiting and I'm praying on it. But until that white officer comes out and absolutely, breaks the lines in the fraternity and shows conscience, racial conscience, moral conscience, uh, then I'm going to assume that there still is a racial component in the police force, and there's no other race in this country that is as deeply affected because slavery was not that long ago. Civil Rights Act, in the grand scheme of things, not long ago. This country still hasn't figured it out yet, and it starts at the top. It doesn't start at the bottom. The people are gonna do ignorant things when their emotions are unchecked and their quote unquote power is unchecked. But it starts at the very top and it goes all the way down from there. But I'm optimistic, man. This is an opportunity to show, a quick pivot because these, Lord willing, these riots, uh, and no further deaths because there's another gentleman who died. Obviously, he was looting as well, but he died in the process. And some people say he had it coming, but it was unnecessary. All of it's unnecessary. We don't want to see any more death. And that's
Yeah, a lot of lives were affected because of the reactions to these situations, and so
That's
we just
why,
got to
yeah,
be
yeah.
mindful of it.
Take all the components out, the power and the race. Let's 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 make sure that nobody has a reason to feel like there's some wrongdoing going on. But speaking of wrongdoings, I think that's a good pivot to what we love to focus on, man. At the end of our show is our favorite segment, breaking
Breaking
good
good news.
news with Nashad and Sunil.
I forgot the name of my breaking good
Oh,
news, so
no
let me
worries,
check that
man.
real quick.
It's we want to give the proper shout outs to the people who are doing the good things.
Mhm.
So yeah, man, my news is a local hero. He's a 13-year-old boy named Jack Rico. Some people may have heard of him. He's a 13-year-old who just apparently obtained 4 associate's degrees. He's
Hey, more than
4.0,
me.
yeah, 4.0 GPA. I guess the last person to do that uh, in 107 years from the college he went to, Fullerton College. So, yeah, man, it's been a while since somebody has really shown it. And this kid looks like a baby. And to think that, he's taken on that kind of a load to study and do well, and it's it
At 13?
at 13, man.
Wow.
And some people they're gifted, right? They have the mental capacity. But yeah, man. So much props to Mr. Rico. Hopefully, he's gonna find a great job and a great economy whenever he starts working, or he stays studious and researches a cure, or writes a great novel, or whatever's in
Right.
store. Uh,
Maybe he's trying to break the Guinness Book of World Records of most degrees
most degrees, man. That's what's up.
earned.
So yeah, man. Shout out to you. But yeah, what's your news?
So my news is actually animal related. So there's this group in Puerto Rico called the Sato Project, SATO. So basically in Puerto Rico, obviously we all know they've been devastated by a lot of hurricanes, um, and a lot of that has left, um, dogs homeless, right? So dogs have, been washed away from their homes.
Mm.
There's a lot of just rogue rogue dogs running around. So the Sato Project actually uh, takes wild dogs and either reunites them with their families, meaning their owners, or finds them forever homes as well. And so this project has been used to initially started out, they were able to do about 500 dogs per year, and now over the last few years they've been reuniting over 2,000 dogs per year,
Yeah,
which is pretty crazy because obviously these wild dogs are just out there and they're rescuing dogs, giving them medication to keep them healthy, feeding them, and then either reuniting them with their original owners or finding them forever homes. And they're doing that about 2,000 dogs every single year, which is
man.
pretty crazy.
Special
So
for you because
I'm
you're
a
a dog guy, man.
I'm a dog lover, so to see that that's happening, to see that dogs are finding homes like that, it's great because there's no better love than a love from
Yeah, man, man's best friend.
a dog.
Any plans to get a dog again?
Yeah, man, I'm just looking. I don't want to have a dog in my apartment right now.
Right,
I wanna be able to have like a backyard or
right.
enough space to let them be able to, or even like live close to a park or something like that. But until I get that, I don't feel right,
Yeah, man, you want to give him the
getting a
best.
dog.
Right on.
So once that happens, then definitely it's gonna
All right, man. Well, I'll look forward to petting and caring said future dog.
for
Uh,
sure, man.
all right then.
So yeah, we went a little bit longer than usual, but
Yeah,
obviously the conversation took us where it took us.
yeah. It's to be continued actually because we're gonna see how this develops,
Sure.
and hopefully into a positive way, man. So and we have I think race is something that we talk about every couple weeks or months maybe, and so anytime the intersection of race and whatever else comes in, it's definitely it's worth approaching with intellect and calmness, right? So yeah, man, it was good discussing with you. I appreciate the perspective.
For sure. And everybody stay safe.
Right, right.
And love each other.
Hell yeah, man.
That's the solution to everything is love.
Yeah, hey, love, man. All right. Until next
All right.
time, guys. This is the pre-pod.